evening, Israel and Iran continue to trade strikes days after U.S. President Donald Trump thrusted the United States into the war. Israel said that it has launched an attack into the heart of Tehran. It claimed to have struck the notorious Evin prison and security command centers. The Fordo uranium enrichment facility, which was one of the 3 nuclear sites to be targeted by the U.S. Army over the weekend, was struck yet again. Iran launched a barrage of missiles targeting Israel over a 40-minute period. Tehran had warned that the United States may have started the war, but it will end it. This after President Trump warned of a regime change, even as his deputy claimed that they are at war with Iran's nuclear program and not with the nation. As oil prices soared amid escalating tensions and fears over the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Trump has warned oil producers not to hike prices. He said, and I quote, "Everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Don't do it." Joining us now on the show to decode the impact of the conflict on the world and India is Javed Ashraf, former Indian ambassador to France and Singapore. Ambassador Ashraf, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with the options that Iran has on the table. The Iranian foreign minister is in Moscow today to meet the Russian leadership. What do you think Iran can do next? What are their diplomatic and military options?
Well, thank you, Parikshit. I think Iran has a limited set of options at the moment. Let's first look at the short run, which is the immediate context of the conflict. It will intensify its attacks on direct attacks on Israel, as it is doing. But, we have to see how much staying capacity it has. It has a limited, of course, number of missiles. And together with launchers, some have been used, some have been destroyed. So it may be able to carry on this for some time. It will get moral and diplomatic support and a modicum of material support from some of its allies or partners, including China and Russia at most. Its proxies in the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, have been, in a sense, destroyed quite significantly or degraded quite significantly. In Syria, Assad is gone. And, in Hamas, of course, is now been completely decimated in its ability to attack Israel in any meaningful way. Houthis are there, and they may be able to launch a few missiles at Israel. But remember, they're up against a country which is not only technologically and militarily advanced, but it has an unfettered support of the world's largest military power, and it continues to have the diplomatic backing of almost the entire Western world. So Israel will continue to attack, and I think it has 3 sets of objectives. Why I'm saying 3 sets of objectives? Because Prime Minister Netanyahu's objectives in the war since October 7 have kept evolving. First, from responding to Hamas to complete cleansing of Gaza, and then to attack all of the proxies of Iran, and now eventually to attack Iran directly. So one is, of course, the destruction of the nuclear capacity facilities, because you cannot destroy nuclear knowledge as such. Second would be the decimation of their military capacity, their leadership, and the capacities to attack Iran. And the third, of course, would be the far more dangerous and destabilizing possibility of seeking a regime change. And they do not discount that possibility. So we are up in terms of Iran with its limited capacities, but great will. I mean, here's a country that has an enormous capacity for resistance. We've seen that in the 1980-88 war against Iraq, when it was, in a sense, in disarray after the Islamic Revolution. We've seen that ability to withstand 3 decades of very punitive sanctions. And it is, in a sense, ingrained in its heritage, the sense of martyrdom and resistance from the Shiite tradition of Islam. And this is something that they recount to themselves all the time. So it has the will, it has the fierce capacity for resistance, but it may not be able to sustain a prolonged attack. So what it might also do is that, just the last point, that as it seeks to intensify its response, it may also try to seek a back-channel process of de-escalation and some sort of a resumption of a dialogue process, something in which the entire world is interested and invested.
All right. Ambassador Ashraf, aren't you also worried that Israel is being allowed to go after Iran, go after Gaza completely unchecked with no one to pull them back? We've seen the Gulf nations condemning the war, seeking de-escalation. Nobody's condemning the United States. Europe is condemning the violence, saying there should be de-escalation negotiation, but they're also saying Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. In the current circumstances, who will hold back Israel?
Well, I think you raised the moot point over here. And, one of the things is that what you see is a complete disregard of international law and a complete impunity with which it is being done. And it just shows that the so-called international order has completely collapsed. It never was fair or even. And you see the double standards with which the Western world, approaches global situations. And so here you have you've seen what has happened in Gaza over these years. You've seen that even those who are seeking aid are being shot at. There is a complete effort to eliminate the presence of Palestinians over there. 50, 60,000 people have lost their lives. That's one part of it. But there is also the fact that, please remember, that Iran is not yet, legally speaking, in violation of its NPT obligations. There is nothing that prevents enrichment, and it has not yet said that it is developing a nuclear weapon. That it is accumulating 60% enriched uranium may be a cause of concern and for the world, but it by no means is a violation of the international law. The second point is that JCPOA was something which the United States pulled out of in 2018. And while these negotiations were going on, and there were 5 rounds of negotiation, and you remember that President Trump himself said so on May 15th, that they are close to reaching a deal. When he warned Prime Minister Netanyahu that don't we are in the process of negotiating a deal and want him against attacking. But there's something I wanted to say to you that when I was in Washington D.C. More than a decade ago, one very senior diplomats or official had told me that Israel is one country that can get United States to do whatever it wants, and that is precisely what you see 5 months into his presidency. A president who said he's all for peace and he's against forever wars is once again dragging the United States into a war in the Middle East, against which he had spoken for so long, and which had also extracted a heavy toll on the United States that has led to some great economic consequences. So yes, you see that happening. And I have to say that for Iran, there is the other problem, that if it goes after the Straits of Hormuz, it will probably, sort of lose the support of some of its partners, or some of the, some of
Like
the major
China.
countries like China, which is heavily dependent on it. It would also be a source of great concern for India and many other countries. As far as the Gulf countries are concerned, while they have, and you raised a very important point here, I wanted to say that, for the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and UAE, while they may get some relief from the fact that that Iran's nuclear program may have been set back by a decade, or maybe we still have to assess the exact extent of damage, and we still don't know where the 400 kgs of the enriched uranium is. Certainly, IEA has no idea where it has gone. But they have to also watch out, because once Iran has been debilitated or weakened, there is going to be, perhaps United States will no longer be in a position, or will no longer be willing to back Saudi and UAE against Iran, because Iran has been weakened, and may give greater space for Israel to try and assert its hegemony over the entire West Asian region. What that would lead to is perhaps a quest by the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and UAE, in particular, to seek nuclear weapons themselves, or some form of deterrence against what they have seen could be a unilateral action against which there is no barrier, there is no restriction, there is no global way to stop it. So you will see this also translating into perceptions in East Asia, Northeast
Yeah.
Asia. where, Korea and Japan would say that, look, you need to to look after yourself, and which means that, countries with advanced technology will say, well,
Okay.
it's only a breakout into a nuclear weapon state. So
Yeah,
this is also going to be a great damage to the
absolutely.
non-proliferation regime, and it certainly makes the world much, much more insecure. And if we are talking
Absolutely.
about
Worrying
regime
times there.
change, yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
if we
it's
are talking
definitely
about
true.
regime change, remember what the consequences of that were in this is going back to the neoconservative agenda of the late 90s and early 2000s, when they brought about regime change in Iraq against once again on the specious logic of their having weapons of mass destruction, which was proved to be wrong. They went after Libya once Libya had forsworn its nuclear program. They brought
Ambassador
about
Ashraf?
regime change in Afghanistan. So we are looking at a longer term consequences which go beyond simply
Absolutely.
the outcome of this war.
All right, Ambassador Ashraf, thank you very much for joining us. You really summed it up very well. There are multiple layers to look at this conflict from, and possibly what Israel may be looking at is not just a regime change in Iran, but also hegemony in the larger Middle East region. And this is something that will make a lot of countries in the Middle East very uncomfortable. And clearly, there will be consequences for India as well. We're not aligned.
And
We
Parikshit,
have been
just
neutral so far. Yeah,
one more country which we should not forget about: Turkey, a pretty significant power, which a history, centuries-old history of having dominated that region. How it is going to see this, and Turkey is an interesting place. It's a NATO member, but also with great influence in the region and very close partnership with Russia as well. So
right.
how it sees this vacuum and how it seeks to place itself in this will also have very strong consequences for the region, for Europe, and for the Mediterranean.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ashraf, for joining us with those very sharp views on the Middle Eastern situation. A quick look now at the other headlines.